Hello, gorgeous, and welcome to the Women on Top podcast. I'm your host, Valerie Lynn, and with over 15 years of business experience, I became truly passionate about finding ways to support and hear from way more women. And what we know to be true is that women thrive when they are in their favorite position, on top in business, in relationships, in personal growth, and on top in being real and authentic to who the hell they are. So I invite you to sit back and enjoy the Women on Top podcast. Well, welcome back to another amazing episode of the Women on Top, everybody. And I have been looking forward to this conversation like you wouldn't believe. Today, I have with me somebody so special. And I was just sharing with her that I kind of have this girl crush on her for many reasons. But I have sitting with me Raja Katz, and she is an international airline pilot with well over a decade of experience. And she's also a strong advocate for women in aviation. She's born and raised in Germany, and her journey into aviation started pretty early, which we'll get into a little bit as well. And she's now the pilot of the Airbus 350, which is a super modern, like state-of-the-art, hyper efficient, long haul jet. And so I also want to ask her some questions about that. But basically, I've been following her account for quite a while, and I'm just really impressed by her and her leadership. And so I am just so glad that you're here with me today, Raja. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Valerie. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm so happy to be here.
It's always such a almost like a sacred moment for me when I get to sit across the virtual stage from somebody like you. And I don't even know where to begin sometimes because I have so many questions. But I think what I'd like to start with is that you are literally flying a massive, so for anybody listening that doesn't know, the lingo around aircraft, Raja is flying a massive aircraft. It's an Airbus, I don't even know. I'm going to ask you to share a little bit about it, but a massive Airbus in a male-dominated industry. And so could you just share with us in a few words with folks listening about the type of aircraft? And I think this is also your favorite to fly. So if you could share why that is as well, that would be great.
Absolutely. So as you said, the airplane I'm flying is named the Airbus A350, and it is one of the most modern airplanes on the market right now. It is a long haul jet, and it seats over 300 passengers, depending on the configuration with the different classes. It is very fuel efficient, so it's very environmentally friendly compared to other airplanes, and it is just super modern and aesthetically pleasing too. I think it's very beautiful, and it's such an honor for me to be able to fly that plane. I've been flying short haul jets for over a decade, and I've just transitioned to long haul flying last year. And I've briefly flown the Airbus A330, which is like a previous generation of the Airbus 350, and it's slightly older, or 2 to 3 decades older than the 350. And then transitioning to the 350 was just, this eureka moment of, wow, this is where aviation has gotten over so many decades. It's just such a pleasure to fly that plane. Yeah.
Yeah. Was that something that you kind of had in your mind because I think, and so if you could share a little bit too about how you got into the aviation industry, that would be great. But I think as a young girl, you always wanted to fly. So did you always have these visions of like, gosh, one day I would love to fly a plane like that?
I always wished for my career to be a successful one, but I don't think I've had the confidence back then to envision myself in planes like this. So I've wanted to become a pilot ever since I was 12 or 13 years old. And I never had that one moment that made me decide I wanted to become a pilot. It was just this inner knowing that was what I wanted to do. And it was the only thing I ever wanted to do. And that has never changed over the years. So I've said the same thing at 13 that I said at 23 and 33, which I am so fortunate to be able to say because I still feel I very much belong where I am now. But most of my journey in aviation, which started out by flying gliders when I was 15, by the way, most of my journey in aviation was one of self-doubt and fear of failure and imposter syndrome. So I struggle a lot with self-confidence. And it definitely was a journey to get where I am now in terms of self-confidence and, just trust in my own abilities.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit more about that? Like when I see you online, I look at you as somebody who is confident and seems very self-assured. And I was telling you earlier, you look like you have it all together sometimes. And so I would love to just hear, what was that, progression for you of how did you get more confident in yourself as a leader?
It's definitely a process, because I think it has to do with facing challenges that are not overwhelming, but just big enough for you to be able to handle them and growing in the process. And I've had that a lot during flight school, because flight school is very hard. And as long as you show up prepared and just have that grit and keep on going, no matter what you tell yourself about like your own abilities and your fears, that's what makes you grow in the process. So I think I've just faced enough challenges for me to be able to be sure that I can face them. It's just a matter of maybe quantity or two. So it's really hard to describe, but now I'm in a position where I know that I've earned these stripes on my uniform, and I know that I can also have a bad day on the flight deck and still perform well. And I'm not someone who says that lightly, given like that fear of failure and that self-doubt, but it's something that I try to earn every day by showing up prepared, by working hard, by going the extra mile. And that's what makes me confident that I perform well in my job, because I know that as long as I do that and I do my due diligence and I have the best intentions in mind, nothing can really ever happen. I mean, not to say that I'm like getting complacent, but that's a good place to start. That's how I would put it. Yeah.
Yeah, I really love what you shared too about like having tried certain things and kind of having these like little failures along the way and maybe failures isn't the right word, but like learning moments that all kind of added to this level of confidence with where you are now, which I feel like is confidence, but it's also like a calm confidence, which I think is different than sometimes people think of confidence as this like braggadociousness. And I don't think that's what it is that you have at all. I think it's more this like calm self-assuredness. And so I really like that you touched on that, because I think as often as women, we are so afraid to try things because of that fear of failure.
Right.
Along that journey, was there something that kind of brought you forward throughout this time where you've gained all this experience and knowledge? Was there a mentor? Was there resources? Like, what were those things that helped pull you forward?
I think it was really mainly my own experience, like having check rides in little planes that didn't go well. And up until the very end of that check ride, I wasn't sure if I passed or not, because I made mistakes. And it's really how you react in that moment. Do you keep on going and just drop the thought and just focus on the thing that's next and keep going? Or do you just panic and give up? And if you think about it, no one wants pilots who say if there were something that happened mid-flight, who would just panic and give up. You want people who keep their focus and keep on working in a very structured and concentrated manner on the issue and find a solution. And that's what I ended up proving during that check ride. So it wasn't about the mistakes, but how I handled them. And experiences like that made me grow a lot, because I doubted myself throughout that entire check ride, because I saw that I was making mistakes and I saw no reaction from the instructor or pilot whatsoever. So I didn't know how they had taken it. And focusing and keeping on doing what you do is really essential in those moments. And experiences like that really shaped the way I tackle problems now. And so it was mainly my own experience. But back to your questions, in terms of role models or mentors, I didn't have any of them. And that's part of why I do what I do online now with my Instagram account, like sharing my day-to-day work life and trying to help create visibility for women in aviation, because we do exist. And it is something I never had, and I wish I would have had, but I didn't know any pilots back then, let alone female ones. And I want to give back in a way that I don't consider myself being a role model. That's for others to decide, but I want to be someone that future pilots, especially women, can ask questions and can come to with their problems and with their doubts, and just see that it is possible.
I love that. And you are doing that so actively, which is also why I really admire you, because you just put it all out there online in such and not just an educational manner, but like a really approachable manner. And I think that it's important for women to have something that they physically see that helps them, see themselves in a way, so that they have this like proof of what's possible. And it's amazing to me that you didn't have that. So I'm wondering, like, you had this intuition when you were young that this is what you wanted to do, but there was nothing that really sparked that. Like, was there a memory at all or anything that you remember of being like, gosh, I just love aviation? Like, how did you even come to think about this as a career?
Well, first, thank you so much for your kind words. I really appreciate that. Well, I wish I could tell you like this one story that happened, and that's what made me want to go into aviation, but I really didn't have that. So I think it just grew. It didn't come overnight, but at some point I just knew that I wanted to fly planes for a living, and I considered flying for the military for a while during my teenage years, and I ended up interning there, and it was not for me. Long story short. So I ended up going into civil aviation, which turned out to be great and turned out to be the right path for me. So as I said, this dream came about when I was like about 12 or 13. And I've always been all or nothing person, and I wanted to go all in very early on. So I did my research on how to get into aviation as early as possible. And I found out that you could start out flying gliders at 14. So I got in touch with the local airfield that offered glider flights, and I tried to become a member there, but my parents weren't sure whether I was serious about it, and it's not the cheapest of hobbies. So I ended up spending an entire season, like every weekend, on the airfield, just making friends and watching the others fly, until my parents understood that I was very serious about it, and they ended up paying for my gliding. So I flew my first airplane solo when I was 15. Which is, it's incredible that that's possible, but it's really easy to learn how to fly when you're young, because you're not overthinking things. You're just doing the stuff that they tell you to do. And that helped me a lot. And I enjoyed that very much. So that's how I got into aviation pretty early on. Yeah.
Amazing. I did not know you could fly a glider at that age. And this brings me to my other question, because I shared this on a different podcast, but I've had a little bit of flight anxiety for kind of ever. It used to be so bad that I wouldn't even get into like a small plane. I would be so anxious, and I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to travel? And so eventually I, calm down enough that I can travel and it's fine, but I still get those like jitters. And so for you, have you ever felt nervous or scared or had a moment of fear at all when you're flying?
Never throughout my entire career have I ever felt unsafe or scared during a flight. That's what I can say for sure. That goes not for the fear of failure that I talked about earlier. And that is an entirely different story. But in terms of aviation safety, I've never felt scared once. Even when it comes to turbulence, which a lot of people are scared of, and maybe you are too. I don't know if you're an anxious flyer. That's usually something that scares people. Let me just tell you that turbulence is not unsafe as long as you make sure that you keep that seatbelt fastened whenever you're seated. So that's really essential. And as long as that seatbelt is fastened, you're safe. The plane goes through a certification process where they do stress tests, and those stress tests go far beyond anything the airplanes encounter like in their day-to-day operation. So the airplanes can handle much more than as humans can, because we tend to get sick during turbulence, but the planes are totally fine. And it really comes down to fastening that seatbelt whenever you're seated. It's really not something that like the flight attendants say over and over again. That is true and that is real, because turbulence can happen unexpectedly at any time. And we don't always get a chance to give you guys a heads up or turn on the fasten seatbelt signs. So that's why even when they're off, they tell you to keep that seatbelt fastened, because that can make all the difference in the world. And as long as you do that, you're good. There's really nothing to worry about. I keep telling people it's like being in your car on a bumpy gravel road. That's all that is really. So we are super chill on the flight way.
What is turbulence for those of us that are like, gosh, it just feels like rough air? What does that actually mean?
So have you ever been in a sauna?
Yes.
So you know that it's hotter the higher up you get, right? And that's because warm air rises to the top and the cold air descends to the bottom. And that's what happens in our atmosphere too. So there are various situations that lead to air getting hotter. Like if say there's like a dark surface somewhere, that's what makes the air really hot. Like when you have a dark car, like a black car, it tends to be really hot when the sun is shining onto it. So that's where the air heats up, and that's what makes it like ascend and go higher, and that's what makes the surrounding air descend. And as you can see, there's like this vertical motion of air, and we fly right through it. So at one moment you get this little like bump from the bottom, and the next moment when you're in the descending air, you get that bump from the top. So that's what makes the air bumpy, along with some other factors, but that's like an oversimplified version of explaining what happens in the atmosphere. It's totally normal, because the atmosphere is just nature doing its thing, and we just happen to like pass through it. So yeah.
Amazing. That's a good analogy. I've actually never heard of that. I've heard of people talking about like, your car and it's like a bumpy road, but to actually kind of have the science a little bit is helpful for me too, so that I can tell my brain when I'm actually going on a flight tomorrow. So I'm actively like telling myself, this is helpful information. So when I'm experiencing turbulence tomorrow, I will be thinking of you giving me that sauna analogy, and that will be helpful.
Please. I'm glad to hear that. And also please know that the worst thing for us pilots when we encounter turbulence is that we could like spill coffee like from our cups. So we really try to talk to the air traffic controllers to get a different altitude, because of course we want to avoid turbulence for passenger comfort and for other reasons, but sometimes that's just not possible. But that's usually when we will make an announcement, and this is me personally, but I'd like to address in the announcement also the anxious flyers and just reassure them that we will keep them safe, because sometimes that's all you need to hear.
Yes. So actually, I do have a question about, as the pilot, what happens when you're up at the front? Like, I just kind of walk us through like a day in the life a little bit of, when you're in the cockpit, what are some of the things that you're doing? Are you just relaxing or are you making plans for the flight? What are the types of activities that go on up there?
So you might or might have not have heard before that most of the time the autopilot is flying the plane, and that is totally true. We switch it on sometime after departure and switch it off for a landing, and that's not because we're lazy or we don't want to fly, but it is one mandatory in certain airspaces to keep the autopilot on, and then it is really just to have our hands free for other important stuff, because if you just fly straight and level, it wouldn't make sense for us to hand fly that, because nothing really happens and we need to do other stuff on the flight deck. And so 80% of what we do during flight is what we call threat management or threat and error management. And that means that we look at potential threats and risks that always exist in one way or the other. That can be like bad weather, or an alternate airport along our route is closed, or maybe a passenger is feeling unwell and there could be like a potentially complicated situation. And we always develop a plan B and a plan C and D and constantly update and refine that plan. So if something were to happen mid-air, that's not when we start to wonder how to proceed, but we have that contingency. For instance, we know where to land at all times. At all times. You could ask me at all times during flight, what's your plan B? And I could just tell you. We checked the weather for all alternate airports along our route. And those airports change as we proceed, of course. So we check the weather there. We check if it's safe to land there. We check particularities about the runways, all the information, like if safe there was one runway closed or taxiways closed, all that. We check that, and we always have that contingency plan in place.
Okay, I had no idea. I mean, that also makes me feel better as a passenger, just knowing that there's always a contingency plan. And yeah, that just helps kind of reassure me in general.
Totally. We think of it like the fire brigade, maybe, because they're always there in case something happens, but nothing really ever happens, right? So, I mean, this may be a bad analogy because, of course, they get called way more often than something happens to airplanes mid-flight, but we're always there in case something happens. Flying is so extremely safe, but we're always there and we're always ready to handle it.
Yeah, I love that. What was your, biggest learning curve throughout this journey? I mean, I know you've just had this innate knowing, like, this is what I want to do. And I know you've had some, as you shared, some imposter syndrome, things like that. But what would you say was your steepest learning curve moment?
I'd say in my personal journey, it would be that I realized that I can be myself and be a good pilot. And that sounds pretty obvious, but it's really not, especially not for women, because the way that we are raised and conditioned in society, the way that we're constantly doubted and asked more questions than men if we want to pursue unconventional career paths or go into fields that are rather male dominated, it leaves you with that imposter syndrome and that self-doubt pretty early on. And it took me years to see that I am qualified to do that job, and I don't need to earn my place on the flight deck again and again and again every single day. I can allow myself to also have a day in the simulator for a simulator check where I don't perform perfectly and still pass. And I didn't do that back in the day. I would only allow the best version of myself to go into the flight deck or into the simulator. And I put so much pressure on myself to be perfect because that's what I always wanted to be. And now I've become a little more relaxed because I can forgive myself and give myself grace because I'm human too. And pilots need to be human too. It's one of our biggest assets. And just realizing that I can totally be myself in terms of my own personality, being feminine, bringing that feminine energy to the flight deck, not having to put on a mask or pretending to be something I'm not. That is the biggest realization that I've had over the years. And it is something I'm deeply grateful for because I can be unapologetically me today. And I perform so much better, to be honest, because I can be myself. And also, as I said earlier, showing the next generation that you can come as you are and you don't have to be that nerdy, quiet girl in school that's into math in order to become a pilot. You can be into makeup. You can be into, fancy clothes or whatever it is that you like. You can totally be yourself because it has nothing to do with your abilities, with your competence, with your skills. And that's such an obvious thing to say, but on the other hand, it's really not. And it took me years to understand that. And today I'm very open about, for example, being a Swifty. I love Taylor Swift. I'm a huge fan. I always wear these bracelets. And I do that. A part of it is because I want to show people that you can be both.
I'm so glad you touched on that. I think that message needs to just be blown up in bold lights and shown across the world for women. Because I think, to your point, we feel like we have to put ourselves into a box in order to be taken seriously often. Right. And I find myself still sometimes unconsciously doing that. And I have to remind myself that I get to take up space just like everyone else. I wonder with you as well, with your journey, and do you still encounter this, but what are some of those obstacles that you had to face with being on the flight deck? Did you deal with some resistance from, your male counterparts or just others who maybe didn't take you seriously? And what was that journey like?
Mm-hmm. Valerie, I'm so lucky to fly for an airline that has a very progressive company culture and a zero tolerance policy with regards to any form of discrimination. So I'm very lucky to be able to say that I've never experienced any form of gender discrimination on the flight deck, and also never faced criticism based on my gender, which I'm very thankful for, because I know that's not a given in today's world. And I have a lot of female colleagues that face different challenges there. But the stereotypical thinking that I face is more from passengers. So I tend to be assumed to be a flight attendant rather than a pilot, for example. I think that's a very common thing. And while most people are very supportive when they hear that I fly the plane and I'm a pilot, there's still this black and white thinking here and there. And that still lingers, especially when it comes to the image of what a female pilot looks like. Like, as I said, in their head, it's this nerdy woman that wears no makeup, that is more masculine, more of a tomboy or whatever. And it's kind of funny sometimes when they see that there's a feminine woman that wears makeup and that doesn't deny her femininity, or that just doesn't try to adopt that male leadership style or anything. I have my own leadership style, and I know that you can absolutely combine transparent and credible leadership with being warm and being soft and being approachable. And I think that's what I touched on earlier. I think that feminine energy on the flight deck is an asset. It is not something you have to deal with. It is not a burden or something you have to tolerate, but it is a valuable resource. And I'm not saying that to praise myself. I'm speaking in the name of all women on flight decks here that probably know what I'm talking about. You bring something to the table that's valuable and that no man can bring, respectfully.
That's so powerful. And again, just so needed for other women to hear that, myself included. It makes me think too, and I'm so grateful that you've had such a positive experience. I think that's huge, right? And culture is just everything when it comes to a company. But I'm thinking of, other women who maybe aren't in that situation. And how can we make sure that we help others, I guess, to feel that way, to feel like they can be both and that it doesn't have to be one way and they can embrace all sides of who they are? How can we continue to do that as women and make sure that others feel that they can step into their leadership in a authentic way?
Yes, I think there's different sides to that. The first thing that comes to mind is lead by example. Just create that visibility and show others that it is possible. And the reason I say there's different sides to it is because it's easy for me to say that, because I'm in a very privileged position and I'm working in an industry where it is always bad to let ego come in the way. But I have female friends who are lawyers, who are judges even, who work in different fields, like in the medical field, and they face so much misogyny and so much sexism, and there's nothing really they can do about it. So I'm a little hesitant to say, well, be yourself, just do it, because it's, as I said, it's not the same for everyone. I think the thing that I tell young people who face gender-based discrimination or so is always that I say, you cannot change the person who says that, but you always have the right to call it out for what it is. So I would always, depending on the power dynamic there, but I would always recommend to just call it out and say, that's sexist, period. And let them deal with it. And they might deny it, but it is absolutely your right to say that. Same goes for racism or for whatever. You cannot change everyone's mind, and you cannot make people who choose to discriminate against you just be super welcoming and supportive overnight. But you can absolutely call out their actions and their behavior and their thoughts.
Oh, that's really, I think I've never heard it like quite so simply and concisely, but it's such good advice. Like that's really good tactical advice I think people can walk away with. And like you say, there's no perfect solution sometimes. But to just be able to kind of call it like it is, I think can be even more powerful than starting any kind of argument or anything like that.
Well, I mean, I don't know. There might be better ideas out there, but it's something that I've made good experiences with because it can lead to various situations happening. Sometimes people are in denial and say, no, it's not. But a lot of times people are just asking questions, are like, how's that sexist? And then you can explain it to them and point it out and create awareness. And that's something. Sometimes that's all it takes for people to change their minds. And, like changing your mind doesn't happen in that very moment. It's more of a quiet process that happens when you're back home, like when you sleep on it. So sometimes I try to see it as an investment. That's like one conversation you had. The person might not like have changed their mind there, but they will think about it when you're long gone. And maybe you've changed something.
That's really important too, because you're kind of planting the seed for them to start to marinate on and potentially come to a different perspective around.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I think that's huge, especially in today's world as well. I'm curious for you. You've had this really beautiful journey, and I wonder what you would say, like, if you were talking to younger Raya, now that you sit where you are and you know what you know, what advice would you share with her? Like your younger, 8-year-old self.
I would probably tell her, have no fear. That's a really broad thing to say, because I think sometimes fear can be healthy and can also show that something really means something to you. But overall, I would love to let her know that there's no need for her to be scared. And I would love to be able to relive my journey being less scared, because I've worried so much about things that could happen or could go wrong, and that ended up not happening. But at the same time, I think that's a pretty normal thing to feel. And it helped me just be even more ambitious and to work even harder towards my goals. So, there's this saying like, what if I'm scared? Well, then do it scared. Which I think implies that there's virtue and value in getting outside your comfort zone and facing challenges that you've not faced before. And I think that that's how you grow in life. So when they say, when you're scared, that's exactly when you jump. I totally feel that. That resonates with me a lot. Yeah. And there's growth behind that jump and behind that comfort zone.
I am just thinking about, these words as you're saying them and reflecting on my own fear that I've had in the past. And it's always those moments that you just step into it that you learn the most and that you look back on with such like fond memories and, you remember those times. So I think that's really valuable. And I need to keep reminding myself of that, quite honestly, because it's easy to get comfortable and, kind of not challenge ourselves and to listen to maybe people who doubt you a little bit or aren't quite on board. And that kind of leads me to reflecting too, with you, have you ever had people who have expressed, doubt as you were climbing this ladder kind of, or, going through this journey? And, what did you do about that? And how did you continue to climb forward?
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you bring that up, because I did have that. And one thing that comes to mind is that guy that I went to high school with. I've shared that story on stage last month, which was, very emotional. But anyway, I went to high school with this guy. We went to the same class, and he was a friend of mine, and I might have had a crush on him at some point. But anyway, he was a good friend, and we got along really well. And he knew that I wanted to become a pilot. And one day in class, when I wouldn't stop talking about airplanes, he just gave me this strange look, and he said, and I still remember his words to this day, he said, Raya, don't you think it's a little grandiose and pretentious of you to think that you can actually become a pilot? I just don't think it's realistic.
What?
And he didn't mean to hate on me. That was just his genuine opinion. And I don't remember what my response was that day, but his words stuck enough with me to write them down in my diary that night. And guess what? I still have that diary 20 years later. I wrote that in February 2005, and I was 14 years old by then. So, So fast forward to last year when he found my Instagram, and he reached out, we got in touch, and we chatted and talked about the good old times. And I, of course, had to bring up how he didn't believe I could become a pilot back then, because, I had to. It was very clear to him now what I did for a living. So I jokingly brought that up, and he got serious right away, and he knew exactly what I was talking about. And I saw him type and type and type, and he wrote this long apology, how he was really sorry for what he said back then. And I didn't see that coming. It was completely unexpected. And I thanked him because I really appreciated him taking, responsibility and owning his own actions all these years later. But at the same time, I was just curious, and I asked him, why now? Why this apology all these years later? And he said, and again, something I will never forget, he said, Raya, once you have a daughter yourself, you start to think very differently about how society treats women. And I found that so impressive. And ever since that day, he's been my hero. And I know his daughter is in good hands, no matter what she wants to do later in life. But at the same time, of course, he's not wrong, because society treats women differently. And society does ask more questions when it comes to women with ambitions of being successful and being in leadership positions and all that. So of course, I knew what he was talking about. And that's just one little story that happened to me along many other stories. And I'm sure that many women in many different fields can tell similar stories. And the important thing is what you make of it. Do you believe them? Because if I had believed him back then and I had given up on those dreams, I would not be where I am today. And I would not be sharing the story with you, for example, now. So, I think it really comes down to that grit and that focus to know that other people's opinions of you are just their opinions. It's the way they view the world, and it's based on their own abilities and their own image of themselves. It has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with your abilities. And it is really important to know the difference and to distinguish the two.
Gosh. That story just gives me chills. And it's such a good reminder, like you just said, of do you listen to that, or do you continue down the path that you feel it in your gut, regardless of what others are saying? It also makes me think, more about how do we continue as women? Because sometimes we get a little competitive. And I wonder what your thoughts are of how do we continue to lock arms and to be each other's cheerleader and to make sure that we're championing women leaders and them leading in their own authenticity. What do you think about that?
In my personal opinion, I think that competition among women is also this aspect of patriarchy that was that we were raised with. Women have to compete for pretty much everything, for men, for jobs, for whatever it is. And to be honest, I hate that mindset, because there's enough room for us all. There's enough room for us women to, as you said, take up space, to be successful, to lead, to inspire the world, to create, to do all that. And it was this societal structure that told us that it's not, and there's not enough room for all of us, which is an inherently sexist thing to think and to assume and to believe. So I think once you change that mindset to everyone is welcome and there's enough room for all of us, that's when all that competition goes away and you're just cheering each other on. And in my opinion, there's nothing more powerful than women sticking together and inspiring each other, because we tend to have that supportive and loving vibe when it comes to uplifting others. And I love to see that. And I mean, I think women are superheroes because, you know, I mean, have you met women? Especially like moms and the way that we do everything that we do, the way we are so used to working hard in silence without anyone like validating our work or applauding us, or, you know, we often don't get credit for all the work that we do. And I know that sounds bitter, but it's not meant to, like, you know, come across bitter. It's just how I view things. I think that that's one of our biggest assets, that we're so used to getting the job done, no matter if like we're validated or we're being applauded along the way or not, that we are very much aware of what we can do and we can achieve. And if we just make that visible and bring that like to the workforce and to everything that we want to achieve in life, that we can really do great things. And being each other's ally and each other's cheerleader is one of the biggest potential that's out there. And I love supporting other women because they're all queens. We're all queens. So to your question, I think, again, how can we do that? Lead by example. Lead by example. It really comes down to the look you give each other, like on the street or wherever you encounter other women. Are you like skeptical, or are you like, "Hi, queen"? Can be as simple as that.
I love that. I feel like that is everything that you are doing. So I just have to give you credit, absolutely, by the way that you are visible, the way that you are championing other women. I know that you're an ambassador, you know, for certain groups as well. And I just feel like you're such a mentor, even if you don't realize it. You have such a strong impact on me and on, the audience that you serve. So thank you for being somebody who serves with such heart. And I just really appreciate your leadership. So
thank you so much, Valerie. That means so much, especially coming from you. Thank you. I appreciate those words.
Absolutely. So I could spend so much time chatting with you. This has been such a great conversation. I always ask my guests to leave like a quote or just something that they feel called to share. And I share that with my next guest, not knowing who it is. So I will share with the last guest left as far as just, you know, a reflection. And then I'll give you the opportunity to leave something for the next guest.
All right.
So the last guest shared, she said, "Whatever idea that's been brewing in your head, now is the time to share it and to start getting support behind it." So I thought that was really good. And it always is amazing. And I always share this, how people share quotes or reflections like that, and they land with me for some reason. And so hopefully that lands with you as well.
Wow. What a powerful quote quote. Wow. A lot of what I think about is how to lead like a genuine, sincere life and how to be a good person, which is not always the same as being a nice person. But I try to lead a life that genuinely cares about others and respects other people, but also make sure that I'm being taken care of. And I view the world in a way that I try to say, like, as long as I take care of my own life and I have my things in order and I know my core values and I try to live by them, that's really all I can do to make the world a better place. And that's not much, but I, do my part, or I try to do my part. And in that context, I'd like to share a Taylor Swift quote. It's lyrics from the song Karma. And it says, karma obviously has a lot to do with it. And the quote reads, "I keep my side of the street clean. You wouldn't know what I mean."
I appreciate that so much. I know the song because I also am a Swifty.
Oh my God. You're telling me now?
I'm like a closet Swifty. I know. I am a Swifty.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah. I've never been to her concert, but I definitely am all about the music. And so I definitely know the song and I appreciate those lyrics. And I like the context that you set with that too. So thank you so much for sharing that. I'm so glad because I feel like that relates so much to some of what you shared about your personal journey and to the way that I see you show up as well for others and for yourself and your values. So yes, thank you so much for
seeing that. Thank you so much for seeing me and for seeing that. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to provide that context, because I know from conversations with friends that everyone has a different thing in their mind, a thought in their mind when they think of this lyrics. It's been such a pleasure talking to you, Valerie. I could go on for hours, honestly.
You were just exceptional. I feel like, again, I'm so grateful. I think that's what I'll say. I'm so grateful and I'm so humbled. And I hope that you'll probably never know the impact that you have, but I hope you just know the light that you bring. And I think it's touching so many women and it's so needed in this world. And so please don't stop doing what you're doing. Please continue to be visible. And gosh, just thank you so much for today. I so appreciate it.
I appreciate your kind words. Thank you so much, Valerie.
Thank you for tuning into the show today. And before you go, I just have one quick favor to ask of you. There is a really simple way that you can help support me and help support this show, and that is to hit that follow button on whatever app you're listening to the show on. I'm trying really hard to level up the content and deliver unique value and amazing guests, and just hitting that follow button is the magic that will help continue to empower that. And remember that the world deserves to hear your voice and your stories, and you deserve a place at the top.